I hate to admit it, but a part of me felt a bit satisfied when I saw the panic on Vivian Jensen's face as soon as she realized she'd made the worst mistake of her life. It all started with my daughter Charlotte's 16th birthday. After the divorce, I tried to make up for being away during those long months on construction sites. As a civil engineer, I sometimes get lost in projects and forget I have a teenager at home. When Charlotte asked to celebrate with a few friends at the Maple Crest Estates Community Center, I thought it'd be perfect, a controlled environment, close to home, and within the condo rules we pay so much to follow. Se inscriva no canal e deixa su like para ter acesso a mais historias como essa. I reserved the space according to the rules, signed forms, fee paid, everything by the book. The girls were excited about the silver balloon decorations, soft music, and a dessert table that would make any pastry chef smile. Charlotte looked happy for the first time in a long while. That's when the door burst open. Vivian Jensen, 52 years old, with perfectly styled brown hair and an expression carved in stone. She had been the president of the Residents Association for 5 straight years, not because everyone liked her, but because she inspired enough fear to keep any challengers away. Musica alta depois das 8 da noite contra as regras, Sister Walker, she declared, completely ignoring the fact that we could barely hear the Taylor Swift song playing on one of the girls' phones. I tried to explain that everything was within allowed limits, but Vivian was already wandering around the room like she was on the lookout for violations. Her eyes landed on an empty champagne bottle I'd never seen before, probably left behind by the previous group. Her face changed, like she'd just found her ammunition. Minors consuming alcohol on community property? That's a crime. Charlotte tried to explain that the bottle wasn't hers. Her friends, Ashley and Sophia, immediately agreed. But Vivian had already made up her mind. She grabbed the bottle and, in a move that still gives me chills, forced it against my daughter's lips. "Let's see if you smell like alcohol, little lady." Time seemed to freeze. Charlotte was paralyzed by shock, her eyes wide with fear. My legs moved before my brain could even process what was happening. In seconds, I pushed Vivian away from my daughter with more force than I had intended. "Get your hands off my daughter!" My voice echoed through the now silent room. Charlotte's friends clutched their phones, some filming, others snapping photos. "You just assaulted an official representative of the association," Vivian said as she straightened her immaculate blazer. "This will have consequences." The next day, I received a notification about an emergency association meeting. Charlotte spent the whole morning crying, worried that the video of the incident might leak at school. The meeting was set up like a public execution. Vivian had carefully selected only her most loyal allies from the board, Howard Davis, Samantha Morris, and 2 others who always agreed with her. The room was arranged so that I sat alone, like a defendant on trial. Mr. Walker showed violent behavior and allowed minors to consume alcohol, began Vivian, her melodious voice contrasting sharply with her venomous accusations. That's when the back door opened. Everyone turned, and silence fell over the room. Leaning on his carved wooden cane and wearing an impeccable suit, stood Judge Robert Anderson, my ex-father-in-law, whom I hadn't seen in 3 years since the divorce. "I believe this meeting lacks the proper quorum according to the association's bylaws, Section 4, Paragraph 3, he declared in that same firm voice he used in his courtroom. "And as a unit owner here, I demand that the meeting be rescheduled with proper notice to all members." Vivian's face went pale as she recognized an authority greater than her own. Later, I found out that Charlotte had called her grandfather in desperation, something she hadn't done since the divorce. When Laura, one of the moms who had been picking up her daughter at the time, came forward as a witness, and Ashley showed photos of Vivian forcing the bottle against Charlotte's lips, the board had no choice but to vote for Vivian's temporary suspension. Then my daughter surprised me. "I don't want to file an official complaint," she said later at home, while her grandparents listened intently. "I just want to move on without any more drama." Eleanor, my ex-mother-in-law, shook Charlotte's hand. "You're stronger than I was at your age," she said, exchanging a meaningful look with her husband. That night, while Charlotte slept, Robert told me something that would change everything. "Vivian Jensen isn't a stranger to our family. I think she recognized Charlotte's last name. After the disaster of the meeting, the following weeks brought an odd calm to Maple Crest Estates. Vivian seemed to step back, staying away from both me and Charlotte. With the school break arriving, normality unexpectedly returned. Charlotte spent more time with her grandparents, rebuilding the bonds that the divorce had weakened. I should have known better. Calm never lasts when there's a storm on the horizon. One Wednesday afternoon, as I was reviewing projects in my makeshift office in the dining room, the doorbell rang. It was Howard Davis, looking tired, with deep bags under his eyes that showed genuine concern. "Can I come in, Christopher? We need to talk privately." Howard was a reserved man, a retired accountant, methodical and exactly the kind of person you'd expect to see on a residence board. I'd never seen him so uneasy. "I found out something I wasn't meant to," he said, sitting rigidly on the edge of the sofa. "I've been digging into the association's finances these past few weeks. Something's been bugging me since that meeting about your daughter." He opened his worn leather folder and pulled out a neatly organized stack of documents. "I was an accountant for 32 years. Numbers tell me stories, and these are telling a very disturbing story." I spread the documents on the coffee table, bank statements, invoices, receipts, all meticulously organized with colored marks showing discrepancies. $85,000, Christopher. That's how much has been siphoned off from the association's accounts over the past 3 years, coinciding with the time Vivian took exclusive control of the finances. Pointing to a series of invoices, Howard explained. "These charges are supposedly for the maintenance of the condo's security system and cameras. The contracted company exists, but when I called to verify, I learned the actual service cost less than half of what was charged. The rest went somewhere else." Flipping through more documents, he continued. "Here, you see renovations for the pool area that never happened. And here, duplicate payments for the same gardening service, small amounts spread out in a way that they're hard to notice individually, but add up. How could she keep this hidden for so long?" I asked, still processing the enormity of it all. "Through fear and control. She pushed aside anyone who showed interest in checking on the books. And when the previous treasurer tried to set up regular audits, she engineered his exit from the board with a fabricated scandal about an irregular fence on his property." Howard then revealed that he had only recently managed to get full access to the records when Samantha, temporarily in charge during Vivian's suspension, inadvertently granted him access to the financial system. "But what really worries me is this," he said, showing me some photographs of a property. "Do you recognize it?" It was Vivian's house. The images showed the same place at different stages of a major renovation, a fancy pool, an elaborate deck, and a gourmet kitchen installation in progress. The dates for these renovations perfectly match up with the periods when the funds went missing. And the company hired for the work is registered in her brother's name. Howard handed me a small USB drive. "Everything is here, statements, emails, forged contracts, receipts, everything I could gather. Make a copy and keep it somewhere safe. Tomorrow, I'll hand this over to the rest of the board and then to the authorities." As he stood up to leave, I noticed his hands trembling. "Howard, you're really taking a huge risk here. Are you sure you want to do this?" His tired eyes met mine with a surprising determination. "My wife passed away 5 years ago. I'm alone now. This condo and the people living here are my family. I can't just stand by and watch someone exploit them. And after what she did to your daughter, there are some lines that should never be crossed." Before leaving, Howard added, "Christopher, if anything happens to me, that drive is your responsibility now. Promise me you won't let it vanish." I promised, not realizing how soon I'd be put to the test. The next morning, the unusual silence in the house woke me up early. Charlotte had spent the day with her grandparents, planning a visit to the science museum she'd loved since she was little. I had my coffee while watching the neighbors start their mornings through the kitchen window. That's when I noticed unusual activity at Howard's place, 3 police cars parked out front, lights flashing silently. My phone buzzed with a text from Samantha, "They're taking Howard. Come quick." When I arrived, I saw Howard being escorted out of his house, handcuffed. His face was a mask of confusion and restrained outrage. When he caught sight of me, he tried to say something with his eyes, but was quickly loaded into one of the cars. Samantha came over, whispering as we watched the scene unfold. There was a secret meeting last night. Vivian only called her most loyal allies. I wasn't invited, but Karen from House 47 told me what happened. Apparently, Vivian found out that Howard was looking into the finances. How did that lead to an arrest? I asked, incredulous. Vivian's brother-in-law is the police chief in Oak Valley, Samantha explained. Apparently, they found evidence that Howard was funneling association funds into a personal account in the Cayman Islands. The irony was almost palpable. Howard, accused of the very thing he was about to expose. This is outrageous. Howard is the most honest person I know. Everyone knows that, Samantha replied. But Vivian apparently has what she calls the convincing evidence, according to Karen. And with her brother-in-law leading the investigation. A chill ran down my spine as I remembered the USB drive I'd hidden in my sock drawer. The responsibility that Howard had entrusted to me suddenly felt all too real. When I got back home, I found an envelope slipped under my door. Inside was a single sheet on official letterhead with the association's logo. Sister Walker? A surprise inspection revealed structural irregularities in your property that violate sections 8.3 and 11.2 of the residence agreement. You have 72 hours to resolve these issues or face daily fines and possible legal action. Atenciosament. Vivian Jensen, President DA Associacao, Reintegrator. Attached was a list of supposed violations, all fabricated, a non-existent issue with a too-short fence, an unapproved paint color on blinds that didn't even exist, and an unauthorized structure in the backyard, just my portable barbecue kit. The message was clear: Vivian was back in power and ready to retaliate. The question was, how far would she go? Then my phone rang. It was Eleanor, Charlotte's grandmother. Christopher, we need to talk. Robert wants you to come to our house right away. Don't bring Charlotte, she's busy at the library with her friends. What happened? Vivian Jensen happened, Eleanor replied, her voice colder than I'd ever heard before. And I think it's time you knew exactly who she is and why our family has a history with her. On the way to the Anderson house, I received a disturbing call from an anonymous neighbor who said he had seen Vivian and two unknown men entering my house while I was out. My heart raced. Remember, the USB drive was hidden in there. I immediately turned back, parked at a safe distance, and approached cautiously. My front door was intact, no signs of a break-in, but when I circled around the side, I saw the laundry room window open. I sneaked in quietly and found my bedroom completely ransacked, drawers open, clothes scattered, the mattress moved. I raced to check my makeshift hiding spot. The USB drive was still there, safe inside an empty vitamin container in the back of the bathroom drawer, not in the sock drawer as I'd originally planned. I quickly reorganized the room, trying to cover up that I'd noticed the break-in. Before leaving, I saw something disturbing. The framed photos of Charlotte had been turned face down, a deliberately intimidating sign. With the drive secure in my pocket, I drove to the Anderson house even more determined than ever to understand the true nature of the woman who had become my enemy. Judge Anderson and his wife were waiting on the porch, their expressions hinting at a long and difficult past that was about to be revealed. Judge Robert Anderson greeted me with a formality that didn't quite match our family ties. He looked even older under the afternoon light streaming through the elegant French windows of his imposing living room. Eleanor served tea in fine porcelain cups while I tried to steady my nerves. Christopher, what I'm about to tell you explains a lot about Vivian Jensen's behavior, Robert began, settling into his leather armchair. 20 years ago, when I was still presiding over the regional court, I handled a real estate fraud case that led to the conviction of a man named Lawrence Jensen. That last name hit me like a bolt of lightning. Her husband, confirmed Eleanor, sitting with him. She never changed her name after the divorce that followed his conviction. Lawrence embezzled over $2 million from investors in a scheme involving luxury condos that were never built, Robert continued. The evidence was irrefutable. He got 12 years in prison. And Vivian? I asked, beginning to connect the dots. She was his secretary and later became his wife, Eleanor interjected, her voice laced with displeasure. She was indicted too, but she managed to strike a deal with the prosecution by claiming she didn't know what was going on. I always believed she was just as involved as Lawrence, Robert said, his eyes distant with old questions resurfacing. But the evidence wasn't strong enough to convict her. The prosecutors preferred a plea deal to get her testimony against her husband. That was 20 years ago. So why would she hold such a grudge against you all this time? Eleanor exchanged a look with Robert before answering, because I was one of the investors who lost everything in that scheme. I was diversifying my family's retirement funds and I lost $400,000, money I had inherited from my parents. And I, added Robert, was the judge who not only sentenced her husband but also made sure he served the full term, leaving no room for early parole given the significant harm caused to elderly folks and families. The realization hit me like an avalanche. So when she discovered that Charlotte was your granddaughter, she saw it as an opportunity for revenge, Robert concluded. Vivian has always been calculating. I've been quietly tracking her over the years. After the trial, she disappeared for a while, only to resurface in planned communities and condos, always taking an administrative role. Eleanor got up to fetch a folder from a nearby cabinet. We noticed a disturbing pattern, she said, handing me the folder. Every community where she worked had records of conflicts, financial discrepancies, and eventually her abrupt departure before any formal investigations could really start. The folder was filled with local newspaper clippings, printed forum posts, and even letters from residents of various condos, all recounting negative experiences with Vivian Jensen. That explains why she never stays in one place for more than 5 or 6 years, Robert observed. Maple Crest Estates is her latest record. And Howard uncovered her most recent scheme, I added, finally grasping the enormity of the situation. Exactly, Robert agreed. And now he's behind bars on charges that were clearly fabricated to silence him. I took the USB drive from my pocket and set it on the coffee table. Howard gave me this before he was arrested. It contains all the evidence of the financial irregularities he uncovered. Robert's eyes lit up with renewed legal interest. We can use this not just to free Howard, but to finally bring Vivian to justice. But how? I asked. If her brother-in-law is the police chief. Christopher, Robert interrupted with a slight smile, don't forget, I spent for decades on the bench. I have contacts at the State Investigation Department who aren't easily impressed by the authority of a small-town police chief. Especially when there's solid evidence of corruption. While we hashed out our strategy, Robert's phone rang. It was Charlotte, asking when she should come back to her grandparents' house. He assured her everything was fine and suggested she stay with her friends for a few more hours. Christopher, Eleanor said after Robert hung up, there's something else you need to know about Vivian. Eleanor revealed that years ago, Vivian had tried to blackmail Robert with false accusations of misconduct while he was still a judge. The attempt fell apart miserably when all the witnesses she named confirmed Robert's alibi. She's not just dishonest, Eleanor warned. She's vindictive and has no scruples. If she catches wind that we're gathering evidence against her, she won't hesitate to strike again, probably through Charlotte. That possibility made my blood run cold. I picked up the phone to call my daughter, but before I could dial, a message popped up. It was from an unknown number, with only a photo of Charlotte walking into the library with her friends, clearly taken that same day, and this message, it'd be a shame if something happened to your little princess. I showed the message to everyone, my heart racing with worry. It's time to put an end to this once and for all, declared Robert, his voice as firm as when he faced far worse criminals than Vivian Jensen. In the hours that followed, we put together a meticulous plan. Robert reached out to his contacts at the State Investigation Department, who promptly assigned 2 agents to our case. Samantha, as a board member, provided legal access to all the association's records. I handed over the USB drive containing all of Howard's evidence. Eleanor, in turn, called an emergency board meeting for the very next day, using her social influence to ensure a packed attendance. The element of surprise is crucial, Robert emphasized. Vivian can't suspect a thing until the right moment. To keep Charlotte safe, we decided she would spend the night at a friend's house, a family that Robert personally trusted, to ensure discreet protection by a retired security guard who owed him a favor. By then, other pieces of the puzzle were falling into place. Ashley, one of Charlotte's friends, sent over more photos from the party incident, including angles that clearly showed Vivian forcing the bottle against Charlotte's lips. The images were even more disturbing than I remembered. They captured Vivian's excessive force and a look of satisfaction as Charlotte looked terrified. Child abuse, Robert murmured as he looked at the photos. That alone could bring criminal charges. While we were finalizing the details, we received an unexpected call. It was Howard Davis, newly released on bail. "They're falling apart," he explained when he arrived at the Anderson house about an hour later, visibly shaken but determined. "The prosecutor has started asking questions about the source of the evidence against me. It seems Vivian's brother-in-law's tactics work great to intimidate residents, but they don't fool state officials with a keen eye." Howard confirmed he had kept extra copies of all the documents in a bank-safe deposit box, a precaution that now seemed extremely wise. "Vivian made a fatal mistake," he said. "She could have continued her scheme for years if she'd stayed under the radar. But by attacking your daughter and then falsely accusing me, she drew too much attention." That night, while everyone else slept in anticipation of the coming confrontation, I lay awake replaying the events of the past few months in my head. As an engineer, I'm trained to spot structural flaws, weak points where even the sturdiest building can collapse. Vivian Jensen's empire had one fundamental weakness: her arrogance led her to believe she was above any consequence. The next morning, the association meeting was set for 10 o'clock sharp. We arrived early, strategically taking positions around the room. The state agents were discreetly present, posing as new residents interested in the association's procedures. When Vivian finally walked in, brandishing her usual controlled smile and an impeccable blazer, I noticed something different in her eyes, a flicker of nervousness betraying the confident image she tried so hard to project. She hesitated for a moment when she saw Howard in the room, but quickly composed herself. The meeting began just as planned. Vivian started off with trivial topics about condo maintenance, clearly stalling the inevitable confrontation with Howard. When it became impossible to avoid the subject any longer, she subtly suggested that he should excuse himself given the serious charges pending. At that very moment, Robert rose, as imposing as he had been back in the days when he ruled the courtroom. "Ms. Jensen, I believe it's time we addressed the real charges that deserve attention in this community. Se inscriva no canal e deixa su like para ter acesso a mais historias como essa." I saw Vivian's face go pale as she realized that all her manipulations and schemes were about to collapse, not by an outraged father or a retired accountant, but by the very justice system she had worked so hard to corrupt. And in that moment, I felt a strange peace, knowing that my daughter would finally be safe from the reign of terror that Vivian Jensen had imposed on our community for far too long.